thank you so much, Chad Ferrin, for being here and speaking with me. Matt Orozco here at Macabre Daily. Really excited to speak with you a bit about your new film, Nightcaller, Chad. And before I kind of go into that, just to set a little bit of context for the folks that will be watching this, Chad has had decades in the industry, working across various different companies such as Troma, and has directed over 19 films, written, I think, is it 13, and produced 14, along with various different credits across different aspects such as editing, cinematography, stunt work, acting, you name it. So Chad, welcome to the interview and nice to have you.
Wow, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, well, I know you have quite a few fans here at Macabre Daily, myself included. Even have a copy of Exorcism at 30,000 feet somewhere behind me in these shelves. And we're really excited for your release of Nightcaller next week. I think it's this week, actually. It's Friday, correct?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, first and foremost, what was your inspiration for Nightcaller?
Well, I guess it kind of started when I was doing Exorcism at 60,000 feet. I had a really good time with Bai Ling and Kelly Maroney. And so I was kind of thinking of, I just wrote a spec script based on my experience with them in the lead kind of idea. And my love of, seance on a wet afternoon, I'm trying to think of all the other things, Fulci's New York Ripper. I mean, all these kind of things that kind of sit in the back of your head of movies you really liked, and then they come boiling up and you're like, hey, that would be interesting to combine this with Maniac and a touch of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, things that are just kind of swirling around, writing for a couple actors that you really liked working with. So the script was written, they liked the script, but we couldn't find any money for it. So it went off on the shelf, made the deep ones in between that, and then kind of had the idea of that business model on the deep ones, which was basically find a couple actors and say, hey, I got this great role for you. Can you put in 50 grand? Can you put in 10 grand? Can you put in 20 grand? Whatever it is. And two of them are like, no, thanks. But one of them's like, hell yeah, that sounds great. And so you kind of building on that, you're like, okay, pretty soon we've got, $50,000, $60,000. And you're like, that's enough to crank it out. So took that business model, went back to Nightcaller, even though in between that, I had optioned it to another production company. They failed to make the script. I got the rights back. And then I'm like, okay, let's try this way. Kelly, do you have any money you want to put in for this? And she's like, sorry, I don't. Robert Miano, hey, can you find someone who wants to put in some money for this lead role? Try Susan Prever. Call up Susan Prever, send her the script. She reads the script, loves the script. Yes, I'd put in this much money. So then after that was attached, we start looking for a few more bucks here and there to fill out the holes and, make and get things we need. And that's kind of how it spitballed into that. She loved it and decided to put in money. So that locked one. Then you could leverage her money on other investors and kind of build it up. And then pretty soon you've got 100 grand or 200 grand or whatever it is. And you're like, shoot it in 10 days, in and out, cut it in 2 weeks, post it, get it done. And here we are.
Wow. And you've taken almost like the bootstrap startup model to the filmmaking industry, it seems, where you work with a kind of angel round of investors that are kind of your actors as well, and then build from there. I like it.
Well, I kind of took the whole thing, the idea really struck me. It's kind of a Corman idea of making things, but at the same time, looking at the Harvey Weinstein bullshit and the whole casting couch thing. And instead of like, hey, instead of fucking these chicks, let's just get these broads to invest in movies and make movies. Everyone gets something. You're not abusing anyone. You're not doing this. You're not giving favors to get a role. You're just like, hey, look, we're all going to make this together. I wrote the script, I did the thing, we're all going to collaborate. Do you want to invest in it? And it kind of just having that, honesty and that upfrontness to actors and whatever. And it's like, it's not just a job I'm hiring you for, it's a collaboration. And if you've got a few extra bucks and you like the role and you want to do it, it's going to get done, it's going to get released, and you're going to have a good time. The getting the money back, that's always a gamble, and I lay that out up front. But when you make it low enough, you're almost guaranteed to see something back in the end, especially, now with everything, even if it's just, up on Tubi, money will trickle in eventually. And if it's made for a small enough amount, you'll get that money back. And that business model on the past 3 films has worked very well, and it's kind of something that I enjoy. You're not, asking for $1 million or something ridiculous. It's harder to get back without a big name. So, it's just kind of being honest up front and saying, hey, I love what I do. If you love acting and love this, what you're doing, let's go do it, pool our resources and go make it. And, it's been a lot of fun, and I really, I like the business model so far.
I mean, I definitely picked up on the use of, some actors that you've worked with before. I definitely noticed Bai Ling and Robert Minal, and it's nice to see that you're kind of, I was going to ask you if you had thought of them for these roles because you'd worked with them, or if you had, if it kind of just became serendipitous. So it sounds like the time you've spent in the industry, the relationship you made has really helped you not only creatively, but also have a stable of people you can work with and rely on.
Yeah, no, totally. Robert's character was written for him. The Bai Ling character was written for her. And then, anyone that I enjoy working with and it gives a good performance, I always try to bring back in some way, shape, or form, just because they're going to show up. They're going to give a performance and not whine about, hey, the craft service sucks, or where's my trailer, or these things. They're just they're in it for the same reason you are, and that's having a good time. And getting it done fast, because to me, the longer something, you got 10 days to shoot it, so you got to do 10-15 pages a day sometimes, and some actors are just don't fit that model, and that can just make it a hectic, rotten experience where it should be fun every day. You should want to be there, you should want to have fun doing it. And the minute you're not having fun, find something else to do is my kind of motto, because it should be an enjoyable experience, not only creatively, but just, socially in a sense. You get there, hey, it's Robert, you shake hands, you hug, you do whatever this thing, and you like that kind of shorthand you've developed with these actors where you don't have to spend an hour explaining your character is this, you're this and that. It's just like, look, we got 2 takes, get it right the second time and move on. And that's, luckily that's kind of the people I've found, or when I'm casting, I kind of, put them through a process to make sure that they're on that same page, because the worst thing you can have is an actor that's going to be a pain in the ass, or a crew member, or whatever it is, that just doesn't get the speed you need to move at to get this done right. And, because time is money, and the longer things take, the more you're spending. And it's like, if you don't have it, you can't spend it. And for me, the most important thing is not only making a good product, but getting it done on time and on budget and having a good time.
It certainly seemed like everyone was having a good time from the performances. If we're judging off of the quality of the performance, it seems like everyone showed up and gave their best, because at the end of the day, we talked to a lot of independent horror filmmakers on our site, and the resounding sentiment is that, sure, it'd be nice to have a bigger budget, but at the end of the day, what it really matters is the people you're creating this piece of film with. And if you don't have those pieces in place, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it's never going to be what you want it to be. And it's easy to say, what's beautiful about having the chance to watch all these different independent horror films is learning that they are, in fact, lower budget. Because when I watched The Night Caller, particularly the effects, they were pretty gruesome. And, it's been something that's been kind of a staple in quite a few of your films over the years. And I was wondering, when you were scripting this out, did you have that kind of brutality in mind, kind of to the detail on the page, or was this something that kind of came in the moment as you were creating and working with the makeup and the visual effects folks?
No, it was always, it was written very nasty, and I wanted it, even nastier. But, it's one of those things, again, where time is, Joe Castro was great at the effects, top notch. But at the same time, if you have more time to really get in deeper and, even to show more stuff, but at the same time, you're like, how much time can you spend on something? I mean, to me, it was like, I would love to have a whole day of just the effects for, the entire thing. But at the same time, you've got to, kind of choose your battles and say, okay, this has to be, the face stabbing has to be pulled off, but you've only got, an hour to do it, whereas on a bigger budget, you'd have an entire day to do him getting stabbed in the face or her getting, you know, a knife up her crotch or whatever it might be. And you can really just make this beautiful Michael Bay looking stab going into a girl's crotch all day long. But you don't have the time to do that. And it's like, let's get it as nasty as possible and extreme as possible, but at the same time, not gratuitously to the point of, okay, you just spent, you know, 20 minutes showing me a knife going in a girl's crotch. You only need, you know, and sometimes just the idea that that's happening is enough to make people cringe and remember more than they had seen. Like, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a perfect example. There's really no gore in it at all, but you leave the film and you're like, oh my God, that was the nastiest, bloodiest, monstrous thing I've ever seen. And no, you didn't really see
shower.
it. Right. So the idea for me was, you know, it was written as nasty and as big and as possible, but then when you get to the reality of it, not only the time you have to do it, but also the size of the location and what, you know, an actor is really willing to, you know, how far she's going to let that knife come to her or whatever it would be. And then you kind of just work around that, and you don't let the things, the way it was in your head, block the reality of what you are able to do. You know, because again, you could have all the money in the world and all the time to do it exactly as it's in your head. And that might not even be exactly what you wanted when it comes down to it. Because a lot of times, you know, it's for me, it's better to be mobile and being able to move the way I envision things around what we have then and there, instead of being stuck into, oh, I've got to have it this way, you son of a bitch, and you're getting all crazy and angry because you're not getting what you want, instead of thinking, okay, well, we can't do it that way because the camera doesn't work, you know, whatever might not work that's messing up that particular shot, and you think around it then and there, and 9 times out of 10 it'll come out better than it was on the page or in your head. And it's just having that ability to kind of bend to the nature of what's coming up in front of you. You know?
Well, there's an adage I'm probably butchering slightly, which is, I think perfection is the enemy of progress. And so I think if you do get too caught up in the detail of what you're expecting, you know, it can get in the way of what might actually organically be, you know, as good or if not better. And when you mentioned the particular scene with the knife and the crotch, the first thing that came to mind was New York Ripper. And then after that, I thought about the part in 7 where you never actually, because you just said the things you don't see sometimes. And there's a part in 7, I'm sure you know I'm talking about, where you see the murder weapon and you know what it was used for. You don't even have to see what happens. You just know that that cannot be good, and you almost don't want to see it. And to credit to the sound work you all were doing in that particular scene, because I think sound as an added element in horror is so important to the experience, because that can make or break how you feel about what you're seeing, bar none.
No, and you know, that's again, Matt Olivo, who I've worked on, you know, almost every film, is the sound designer and recording remixer. I mean, he does an amazing job. And it's one of those things that, you know, and I had the experience on the deep ones where I couldn't afford him. So I had to go with someone else, and they did a fine job, but it was one of those things where you could tell, like you said, sound is such an important thing, but 9 out of 10 people won't be able to tell a damn difference either way. But the one person, and myself included, when you hear it, and his job on this compared to the last job was just a night and day difference, even though it was so minor, but it was still, you know, to me, night and day. And it's like, well, it would have been worth the extra $2,000 or whatever it might have been to get not only someone who I work with frequently, but also someone who you know is not going to fail. You know, and when you take a gamble, sometimes not necessarily it was a fail, but it was at the same time just a small percent of like, it could have been a little bit better. And that kind of, you know, is just one of those things that, you know, will sit in my head. But, you know, like I said, 9 out of 10 people in the audience won't notice or care. And that's with a lot of things where, you know, if you're working with a DP who's like, okay, this shot's got to be beautiful, it's got to look like this scene in The Godfather, it's going to be amazing, and then they're doing like 5 hours to light a scene, and you just got to say, wait a second, no one fucking cares. As long as it's in focus. Most people don't give a shit if it looks like The fucking Godfather, because they're either going to hate the script and think whatever, it's written horrible and it's this and that. Boy, but it looks like The Godfather. Boy, it looks good, but everything else is shit. And you missed all the time that you could have had to get all these extra shots or all these angles or, 5 other takes of her, getting it right, or, reimagining the dialogue and improvising something that worked better than the page and maybe come, something better. Instead, you just wasted all this time. Boy, that scene looks like The Godfather.
Yeah, it can be, I mean, the technical side of it can be such a challenge, but as you said, ultimately it is about making sure you get the point across of the story, whatever it needed for the story as a primary. And then
Right.
if you want to do something extra beyond that, by all means, if there's time, energy, and budget, let's go for it. And when you mentioned earlier that, the journey to script to screen for this seems like you wrote this before, and you did the deep ones in between. Once, how long did it take you once you, said, hey, we're going to do this, and you got your rights back? How long was it from that point to get, to basically post-production and now where we are with the final product?
After I got the rights back and she was interested in the script, it took about a month from her signing on to be shooting. So
Wow.
for most of my stuff, it's usually 2 weeks to write the script, 10 to 2 weeks to shoot the film, and a month to edit. And then it goes into, probably 2 months for post sound and color. It's about 6 months from start to finish.
Wow. It's a really nice turnaround time. And again, getting the rights back is probably seemed to be the linchpin there to making sure that this gets made, which I know can be a bit of a blocker in some cases.
Right. Well, I'm also very good at, after, my trauma experience, I'm very good at contracts. So
I would imagine.
finding little details and things like that. That's why, and that's another money saving aspect of having the experience and being burned or, doing things that are like, oh, if I would have just done that in the contract, I would have been whatever. So knowing those things, I'm not only able to save money on a lawyer to go over all the contracts and things, because I've been through that and I know what the pitfalls are. And when someone wants to option the script, you're like, okay, it's, $10,000 for 6 months. If you're not making it within 6 months, the rights go back to me. If you want to extend them at the 6 month point, that's another $10,000. So then that's all written in, and there's trigger points of where if it hits that day, if they haven't cut a check for $10,000, the rights are back to me. So they have an option to pay or play kind of thing. And most of the time they're like, okay, we weren't able to raise the money and make it in this time. Here's your film back. Or they're like, hey, look, we need another month. We've got this Chinese investor. He's ready to go. We'll have our budget. And it's like, well, you've got till midnight to give me another $10,000 because the clock has reset. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And it's one of those things. For me, it was like, a script is very easy to write, whether it's a good script, whether it's a bad script, that's up to the audience. I don't know. If I like it and I'm excited about it, there's a short window before my excitement wanes and I'm just like, I'm going to write something else because now I'm annoyed with this, or I'm bored with it, or whatever it is. And it's always easy for me to write a script, especially if like an actor comes and says, hey, I've got this idea. I want to do a female death wish. I want to be this Charles Bronson character. Okay. I go back, I re-examine, Death Wish, and, I Spit on Your Grave, and all whatever revenge films that might be able to work for a female character, and I crank out the script. She loves the script, she's ready to go, and then it's like, okay, where's the money? I don't have the money. I'm going to go try to raise the money. And then she goes and tries to raise the money, cannot raise the money, and this is an example of what happened on another film. And, it's one of those things that it just kind of went away. And then it was like this whole Ukrainian thing happened. So originally the actress was a Hispanic woman. She played this thing. She was a maid, and she, it kind of ran the model of Death Wish, and she was the female Charles Bronson. So when that all fell apart, I'm like, I've got this script written for a Mexican character. That money fell through, and then it came up for I knew a white woman that had some money, and I'm like, well, let's change it to a Ukrainian immigrant instead of a Mexican. And we're able to rewrite something, and now it's shoved into another thing and for a possible decent chunk of change to make it. And it was just one of those things of being flexible, but at the same time, not being so, oh, I love this script so much, it's got to be made exactly. It's being willing to bend or to throw it away or to whatever and just say, well, I'll just write something else completely different and no harm, no foul. Where a lot of people get so hooked up on stuff where it's like they'll shoot themselves in the foot, where they have an opportunity to get a film made, but they want it made exactly how they want it or however it is, instead of willing to say, well, I'll just make her a Ukrainian woman instead of a Mexican woman, or a black woman instead of a white woman, or whatever it is. For me, I'm open to those things just because I know I will run out of the love of the project unless it's finding the money to make it, because I've got enough ideas swirling around, good, bad, or indifferent, that I can write a script anytime, any place, anywhere I want. So
was that always your philosophy of kind of being
no, of course not.
Yeah, I was going to say, when did this enlightenment happen?
No, I mean, you want to be, Martin fucking Scorsese or whoever it is, where everything you touch is a masterpiece. But it's one of those things of you realize quickly, whether it's your first film, your second film, your third film, or whatever it is, that it's like, okay, there's elements in it that are great, cinematic perfection that I love, that really give me a hard on. It's the best thing there is, and the rest of it's garbage, or half of it's garbage, or a quarter of it's garbage, or whatever it is. But you have to be able to see that. If you're thinking it's the greatest film ever made, and you're not going to take whatever deal or whatever this thing's because, oh, it's better than that, well, obviously it isn't, because Paramount Pictures isn't busting down your door, or it didn't get into Toronto after, TIFF Film Festival or whatever it might be. And you got to kind of take it as a reality sense. So for me, it's kind of like, if I'm writing something that, I'm getting excited about and I really feel good about it, then that first and foremost is the starting point. But not being, so blind to it. If 5 other people say, God, the second act is awful, or this character is stupid, and being willing to kind of say, okay, well, let me re-examine that and rework it and make that happen. Same thing when you finish a cut of a film and you send it out for, to Robert Miano or whoever you trust to give notes on the cut. And they're kind of like, it's a little slow here, or she's overacting, or whatever it is, and being willing to chop that like crazy, instead of, oh, but the shot is so great, or whatever it is. It's being kind of a cutthroat, a third perspective, really, of looking at your work, instead of just being so enthralled with it, or whatever it might be. You're willing to go to whatever limit to make it as good as it can be. Whether it's the script, or whether it's the cut, or whether it's, the score, or whatever it might be, of just making sure you've done everything to your power to make it as best as it can be. Whether it's Citizen Kane or The Toxic Avenger, you don't know. It's somewhere in there, because you get so close to it that you get blinded by, is it good anymore, or is it bad anymore? And then you send it to a film festival and it gets in, and then it starts getting some great reviews, and you're like, wow, this is actually really good. And then you'll get a really shitty review, and you're like, is it any good? So you start questioning it. And I kind of threw all that away and just said, if I think it's good and I'm feeling confident in it, then that's enough. I've taken the notes, I've taken the suggestion, I've taken the rejection from one film festival that says it's misogynistic, or it offends trans people, or whatever the fuck it might be. And I go, I don't give a fuck, because these other festivals thought it was great. And that's the ground level. And then you start trying to find a distributor. One distributor thinks it's great, but they're not going to give you any money up front. Like, another distributor thinks it's great, and they're going to give you some money up front. And then there's one that's going to give you a whole bunch of money up front, but they aren't going to release it for 2 years. So then you kind of start thinking, okay, which one is the best, not only financially, but also the timing and the release. And you go with whatever it is. And like with this one, 123 Go, who released the deep ones, did a great job, and I have a good rapport with them. And it was kind of like, it was a better deal than the other deals. So you kind of went with it, and you keep your fingers crossed that it does well. And I mean, that's all you can do.
I think there's a lot to that, folks that are aspiring filmmakers might want to kind of rewind on, is that, the less you can take this personal, this collaborative process, kind of the more you can open yourself up to the idea that you're a great idea. It might be a great idea to someone, but the objectivity of having somebody else saying, no, it's maybe not, or it's not resonating,
Right.
just being open to that, and even if you think someone's wrong, just being open to hearing it, receiving it, and
Sure.
then making a decision as the filmmaker, what's the path forward. And, because you're no stranger to the horror genre, just from your own work, you've hit on a few different subgenres. And I was wondering, do you have a particular favorite subgenre that you like more than the others, or one you plan on returning to again? And if so, why?
Um, it's they're all kind of equal, from horror to westerns to sci-fi to film noir. I mean, to silent films. I mean, everything, comedy, it's all there. I love it all, and it's hard to, pick one. I mean, I love horror because you're able to kind of go into all those genres in a way, shape, or form, whether it's an alien creature or whether it's, a sinister noirish, bad guy or whatever it might be. It kind of gives you just a more latitude to go in and out of. Whereas, I would love to do a Western. I've got numerous Western scripts, a film noir, I mean, a heist film. I mean, all those things would be amazing. But I never kind of just, sit back and, say, oh, it's got to be that. If someone else comes along with another script that they're like, hey, we've got this, it's all about the money. If they've got the money to make it, then I'm there to embrace it, and I'll do the best that I can. But I usually like to rewrite, or at least go through something, even if it's just, for my own visualization of the project, just to kind of get an idea of how I want to do it. Because I'm not a storyboard guy or a pre-planning guy. I kind of just go by my gut with a lot of things. And it's like, that's why I usually work with the same DP or different DPs, because they're all like, okay, we need a shot list. I'm like, I don't do shot lists. I'll write in the script an idea of a shot that I have, and seeing I edit all my films, I'm able to kind of know exactly what I need to make the scene work. So I really don't need that. And it'll be written in the script, close angle here on his face. So, it's kind of in there. So, but I necessarily don't pigeonhole myself with an entire shot list of how it's going to be. Because when you get onto a location, it's like, okay, I saw it this way, and that's not how this location looks. So we're going to have to redo the whole thing and get your mind on it. But if you go in there kind of open-minded, it's like, wow, we can get this in, one medium shot, a 2 shot of these guys talking in this doorway. It's like fucking The Searchers. I mean, it looks great. The flight coming in, we don't need a close up on each of them. We don't need anything else. We don't need the reverse. We just need this one shot. And the actor comes up and he's like, I think you need a close up. No, I don't need a fucking close up. It's this fucking Searchers shot. It's perfect. And sure enough, it was perfect. But at the same time, I can understand where he's coming from, because he would like, a different take, perhaps, because if his close-up was better on that. And I'm like, well, look, we've got the girl screaming as a cutaway. If we want to go in between 2 takes of this 2 shot, we've got it. So don't worry about it. So it's just kind of an experience of being on this roller coaster of making it for this budget and knowing what you want, and kind of, it makes it easier. But the big thing for any first-time director, I will say, is just have the confidence. And if you don't have the confidence, pretend that you have the confidence, because DPs, especially people you didn't work with, will kind of feed on you not knowing what you want, and get in there and try to say, oh, well, this is how you should do it. This is how you should do it. And you either can tell them to fuck off and create kind of an animosity, or you can just be confident and say, hey, whatever. Or if you trust your DP, it's like, hey, man, I don't know what should I do, and work that out for a first timer. But never give the idea that you're not as confident as all hell. But at the same time, don't let that seem as a cockiness. It's all, and I'm always open to suggestions, and especially with an actor who's like, hey, I really think we should do it this way, because I want to hit this mark there. And it's like, if it sounds good, then go for it. Because if it pulls off, then the director gets the credit for, a great take or a great shot or whatever it is. So, I'm open to all those things. And again, going back to, if you've got that kind of attitude where everyone's a collaborator, 9 times out of 10, they feel like they've had a more enjoyable experience, instead of just showing up, saying their lines, sitting in the trailer or whatever it is. So,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like being amiable and kind of open to suggestion is part of your kind of broader filmmaking philosophy. And it's probably the reason why, when you think about getting films made, you know, the number one thing I hear from folks that we talk to is that if you really want to get something made, you have to be okay with making sacrifices. And that can mean a lot of different things.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, if your passion is making film and telling these stories, then that should always be the goal. As kind of the resounding sentiment is that as long as you're able to continue doing that in whatever fashion, that seems to be the through line. And you know, you said that the confidence is really important for folks that really want, you know, first-time directors. I want to think about people that are interested in entering into the film business, and someone like yourself who's been in it for decades and has worked across various different mediums, different roles, you know, alongside the confidence, but just somebody who wants to get into the industry broadly. You coming from Minnesota in particular, it's not like you were in LA, you know, when this was happening. So right. What would you suggest for people that are saying to themselves, I want to make a film, I want to be a part of this? What are some things that you've learned along the way that you think would really help others who are trying to do the same?
Well, I think, you know, it's, again, if you have the passion for something and an idea that hits you, and it's just figuring it out what you have at your disposal to do that. And if you're in a town, on a farm, or whatever it would be, just thinking about what you have at your disposal. Okay, I got a bulldozer, and I've got a beat up old 1992 Toyota Tercel. So, you know, you write around set pieces. Okay, so I can have this bulldozer run over this Tercel or crash into it. So now you've got a big set piece of an explosion or whatever. So then it's like, okay, well, let's make like a heist movie. So the getaway driver has this Tercel, and they're going to rob a bank, and they're going to do this stuff. So you now have the two things, this bulldozer and this Tercel, and you kind of write a whole script around these two things that are a small part of the film, but it's the great climax. So now you've written what, and I'm like, okay, my friend John, his dad runs a bank in a small town. So now you've got the location of the bank that you can rob. You've got the getaway car, you've got this, and you need 3 actors, the bank. So you're kind of now building it up around what you have to write your script, and you just kind of let it keep building. And then you're like, okay, my friend John, God, didn't he used to have, you know, an old shotgun? Okay, now we've got a gun. So, I mean, you're kind of building what you have and then working that into the script. And then before you know it, you've got this, you know, 90-page movie with a whole bunch of things that you now set your mind around, instead of writing a script around, you know, because I love a Marvel movie, or, you know, Stanley Kubrick, and trying to emulate that. It makes something around what you have at your disposal at that time. You don't need to come to Los Angeles. It's a fucking hellhole now. So you can kind of make a movie anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So figure out the things you have at your disposal in the town, and your connections and people you feel comfortable with, and, you know, make it happen. It's one of those things. I think that's why it became like this, you know, out of reach goal for a lot of people, was like, okay, you got to come to LA, you've got to get these professional actors, you got to get and make it work that way, instead of just saying, let's just find people who are passionate and they're going to put in a good performance or whatever, and they could go, yeah, but I've never acted before. Yeah, but you're passionate, and I see something in there. So you can pull it off. And once they believe that, okay, you've got your actors, you've got your locations, you've got your thing, now work out the script. And, you know, and as long as, you know, you've given 100%, and, you know, you've made it for, you know, you might get lucky and it might make a dime, or it might, you know, not, but at least you did it. And you can be like, hey, I love this, I want to do it again. Or you're like, huh, I don't want to do that again. And yeah. but I really like the effects angle, or I like the DP angle, or I like, you know, the composing angle. And you could go into those fields, but at least you've had a taste of all of them. And, you know, I think that's the one great thing about, you know, starting out as a production assistant, working on different sets, different budgets, different one, and kind of seeing how every job is done, and knowing what you need and what you don't need and what you enjoy. And you're kind of, when someone says, oh, you can't do that, and you're like, yeah, you can. You just have to do it this way instead of the way it typically would be done on a bigger budget or a union shoot or whatever it might be. And just kind of being able to think outside the box, and, you know, and just getting it done, you know, Evil Dead style. I mean, if they told Sam Raimi, hey, you can't do that because you've already shot 12 hours, now you're going into overtime, he'd say, fuck you. It's me and Bruce and the camera, and we're shooting this. And it's amazing. and no matter the budget, no one's been able to, on a big budget, kind of do what they did in the
No.
time. And same with Chainsaw, and same with these things. There's just an energy. And if you get a whole crew and actors that have that same energy, then you're going to make gold like Chainsaw or Evil Dead or whatever it is, because everyone on that must have had, just the energy and the gumption to not only be doing it, but doing it for 13 hours or whatever, the grueling experience, and stick with it. And then when you're done, it's like, okay, this is something to be really proud of. And which is a rare thing, having made how many films, it's hard to make something that you're like, wow, that's something. I wish.
It is, and I think that that's such important advice for people, is that we get so caught up in looking at what others have accomplished, and we want that for us right now. I want to make that $500, Sam Raimi's a great example. He just had a massive movie release last weekend, and I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know much about it. But what I do know is that that's not where Sam Raimi started. And, ultimately, if you're able to make do with what you have in front of you, just imagine what you could do when you have more. And that telling simple stories, particularly independent, we're very much focused on horror on our site, and independent horror. There's always this idea: I need these practical effects, and this needs to be this big explosion. But sometimes if you can keep it simple, you can tell a really great story and have those moments that really grab you. I just watched a film from Uruguay, that it's 4 people in a rock quarry, and it's great. It's like, but it's when you keep your premise simple, when you kind of keep your concepts interesting. Again, Nightcrawler, as someone who's a big Giallo fan and someone who really enjoys thrillers of all kinds, from the noir to the Cinemax late night ones that kind of that permeated the 90s.
Right.
You can tell that there's a real love of not just those genres, but also trying to bring something new from them. And if you had to give some folks like a recommended watch list, you're preparing yourself to go see Nightcrawler,
right,
what are the 5 movies that someone should take in before, so they can either catch some references or just kind of be set in the mood? What would you recommend for
them? New York Ripper, Maniacs, 1980, the Lustig one. Cruising with Al Pacino, Friedkin's masterpiece.
Underrated masterpiece as well.
Suspiria has elements in there, of course, when she's driving along, that the colors in the window that are a nod to that. Anything, when a stranger calls, there's the Charles Durning version, of course. So, it's one of those things where for me, it's even stuff that I had forgotten I've seen, like A Seance on a Wet Afternoon. Susan had mentioned that film, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'd seen it long ago. Or Curse of the Demon, where, they have that great seance scene with the different voices, or The Changeling has the great seance scene with the, all different ways of doing a seance, and the voices and the things and the sounds. And it's just like little things like that, that stick in my head when I'm writing, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was a great movie, and that was those things. And just that, if that scene can kind of give you that memory of a masterpiece you had seen, then to me that's a great thing right there. Because whether the movie's good or bad or whatever, at least for 30 seconds you're like reminded of greatness. And not, for me, it's just kind of like, and I've done that before, where I'll see a film and I'm like, hey, they got that from whatever. And whether I like the movie or not, I can at least tip my hat and go, at least we're on the same page of films that inspire us, or whatever it would be. And, or Hitchcock, or, De Palma, or things that you like, and that they like and saw. And, it's, I guess, a human thing to have this connection, whether it's a small thing that you're all like, hey, we like the same beer, or whatever it might be, or the same shot, or whatever it might be. So it's just kind of a connection to that. And for me, it was a really fun film of, like, the shots, the scenes of Patrick that are in the film. It was a movie that I really liked as a kid. And then one of the distributors on The Ghouls, Anthony Ganane, he has, a sales agency, a company that sells, films, and he had bought the Ghouls years ago. And I was a huge fan of him as a producer because he's kind of like Australian Corman. So when this came around, I'm like, okay, I got to get Patrick. So I had to call up Anthony. I'm like, hey, can I use Patrick clips of it in the film? And he's like, yeah, 200, but give me $200. I'm like, okay, great. So we worked out this thing, and every other clip was like, okay, what's in public domain? House on Haunted Hill, Dementia 13, Death Rides a Horse. So, I kind of movies that I love. And when you find out they're in public domain, you're like, okay, great. We're going to put that in there. We're going to put that in there. And things that it's just like, no matter what, hating the movie or loving the movie, you can at least appreciate any time that a movie comes on the screen to go like, hey, I love that movie, or whatever it would be that he's watching. And you're kind of, it helps you, warm up not only the character, but hopefully also, if you're a cinephile, it's just one of those things that you just get a hard on over it because you're like, hey, I love that movie, or whatever it is. And there it is in a movie. So
there's a feast of that at Nightcrawler, particularly in Robert's room, where you can see all these different posters and you can see the movies on the wall. And I found myself pausing and kind of trying to pick out if I could see what was there. And you're right that, the subjectivity of art, makes the interpretation part of the fun of the experience. And being able to look at it, even if it wasn't the intention to say, that kind of reminded me of Silence of the Lambs, or that kind of reminded me, Body Double or something like that. You're like, that's really interesting. And ultimately, that's what makes, I think, film such a great medium overall. And what makes horror so interesting is that, because, so much of horror films are really much just iterating on really regular themes, but seeing what really inspired you as a young person and then turning that into your own. And I'm curious, as you think to the future, do you have anything on the horizon that you're able to share, or things that you're working on that people can look forward to now that you've got Nightcrawler coming out?
Well, we just finished we're finishing post-production on Pig Killer, which is based on the Canadian serial killer Robert Willie Pickton, who killed 49 prostitutes and, fed them to his pigs. So that turned out really well, actually.
Sign me up.
Excited about it. It's actually really good, and it's one of those things where the music and the songs, to me it's kind of like Boogie Nights meets Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. We were able to take all these great songs and interweave them as score throughout, or Casino, or what Scorsese did. It's things where they'll take a song and run it as score, and it just fits so well. And it's one of those things that worked. It's a love it or hate it movie. And if you dig the music and you like the way it goes, it's amazing. If you don't, you probably hate it. But at the same time, for me, it was one of those things where when you tried something new, like putting a song that's like, wow, Concrete Blonde's Tomorrow Wendy over a scene, and you're like, holy shit, that's fucking amazing. I don't even need to hear their dialogue. I'm editing it, I'm hearing it, I'm getting just so excited by it that when you finish it, you're like, okay, this could either be like, wow, or it could be like, what the fuck is that music in that song? So, and it's sticking to that. And there were some people who watched it, and the thing are like, okay, that's a little too much. I'm like, no, I like it. And then someone else would say, I like it. So then you kind of like, okay, I'm in a direction that it's split, but it could go either way. So it's exciting. And I hope, to have it, we're finishing a cut now with the sound and the mix and everything to have it ready for the film festival submissions that are coming up like the end of this month. So hopefully it'll come to life in August at the festival circuit.
That would be amazing. And we'll keep our eyes out. And of course, we're happy to, promote it if it does go through the festival circuit, and we share the love. But Chad, thank you so much for the conversation and sharing a bit about the making of the film, yourself, and also your experience in the industry. And I know, just to reiterate, we have Nightcrawler coming out this Friday, May 13th. You can get it on various streaming platforms: iTunes, Amazon, Dish, Google. And hope everyone goes and sees it, particularly if you like the movies that Chad mentioned, as well as any of the others that have been in that adjacent thriller, serial killer, gory, extreme. I was thinking to myself, like, Unearthed Films should totally pick this. This is like an Unearthed Films kind of thing. But thank you so much, Chad, for the conversation. It's been a delight talking to you.
Thank you. Same here.